So, Elle, we've spent the last few weeks sharing from Ben Crow's amazing book called Where the
Hmm.
Light Gets In. And
Mm.
I'm so glad that we're doing this, kind of
Yeah.
unpacking this a bit more together because there's so much in this book. And, going
Yeah.
back and rereading things to sort of prepare for what we're going to
Mm.
share has really been such a blessing and a gift to me. So,
Yeah.
so thank you.
Oh, no, thank you. You're the one that pointed me towards this book. It's fabulous.
So, we're going to shift gears a little bit now, and we've been talking about expectation, and we're
Yeah.
shifting towards talking about connection.
Well, I love it. When I just read the title of chapter two. Well, what's it called? Perspective shift number two. The
Yeah.
title just, I don't know, is beautiful. It's called From Fitting In to Belonging, the Power of Connection.
I remember reading that for the first time, and without even reading further into the book, I remember sitting back
Mm.
and thinking, oh my gosh, just that languaging, the difference
Mm.
between when I read the words, fitting in, and I
Mm.
read the words belonging. Um, it's almost like viscerally, they feel so different to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fitting in was the whole people pleasing and it comes from a place of fear and hoping people won't, will only see what's good and won't see the
Yes.
real thing.
Yes,
And belonging is so much safer. It's
it
just,
is. I was
you know?
immediately taken back to being a teenager when I saw the word from fitting in. And I was remembering, just trying to be who I thought I needed to be to fit in with
Yeah.
my cohort at school or the people I was hanging out with or whatever it is, what you're wearing. When you read that title from fitting in to belonging, I realized how superficial trying to fit in was. Like
Yeah.
it's the outward appearance is what we think people need to see, whereas belonging, like, I don't know, it's your whole being. It feels like it comes from the gut.
Absolutely. And yet, as you share that, it's amazed me how for so long, even though fitting in felt so superficial, or, it is
Mm,
superficial, it's still, for many people, is such a need. And I know in my
100%.
own world, like the need to, and I remember one day seeing this gorgeous meme, or I don't know, it was probably an Instagram post or something, but it was a picture of a whole lot of daffodils. No, not daffodils, daisies. A whole lot of daisies,
Okay.
like you say, yellow daisies. And in the middle of them was one like white daisy.
Yeah.
And how the white daisy, it popped out and it stood out amongst the yellow.
Mm,
And I can't remember even the subtitle of it, but I remember it was something about, not being afraid to shine and to sort of stand out and be yourself, really.
yeah.
And we see a lot of that online as a invitation to, just be yourself and
Mm,
just,
mm.
and yet it can be so hard because it's such a vulnerable place to be. And I like
It
that he
is.
goes on, where does he say it? He says, we crave connection because it makes us whole, but we
Mm,
avoid it because it makes us vulnerable. And
mm.
I think, so when we're avoiding connection, we're still longing to fit in, and we do it
Yeah.
without, being open to being vulnerable. And
Yeah.
yet, belonging is so completely different. So,
Mm.
yeah, so let's talk a bit about belonging and
Sounds like
connection
a plan.
and
Yeah.
how important it is.
Yeah. And it is this deep desire, isn't it? Even if we don't recognize it for a while, there's this yearning to
Yeah.
truly belong,
Well, I
to
remember
belong.
even, relocating. So reasonably recently, we
Mm.
relocated. I mean, it's been 2.5 years, but in the big scheme of my life in my
What's two and
50s,
a half years?
it's a bit short.
Yeah.
But I remember being quite excited about the
Mm.
adventure. I think
Yeah,
Greg
of
and I've always
course.
kind of enjoyed adventure and the newness and Adelaide is just beautiful and we know with so much
Yeah.
to offer. And yet the reality after the first sort of month or two being here,
Mm.
realizing that we don't have those connections
Yes.
yet. you
Yeah.
know, can leave one feeling a little bit um, almost like a ship without an anchor. You kind of
Yeah.
feel, and then also that I remember feeling that sense of not worry, it almost like trepidation more of wanting to connect well. So, if we are going to
Mm,
start making new connections, how do we, like I kept thinking, how do I have feelers out for for who are my people that I want to connect with? Because I think
yes.
again, all of us in the past might have had past experiences in
Agreed.
connecting
Yeah,
where things didn't actually go
that's
as
right.
we hoped.
No, and we're not getting younger, Kath. We don't want to we want to get it right, because we want to make the most of the time we've got, basically. But that's interesting. And when you moved to Adelaide, so you said connection's kind of like a bit of an anchor. For me, without connection, it's a little bit of an emptiness. So,
Yeah.
you left to go to, and we get to connect fairly regularly, thankfully, because of this podcast. And I think life, if we weren't doing this, would be just busy, and we probably wouldn't be anywhere near as intentional with our connection.
Oh,
But,
yeah.
you left and went to Adelaide. My bestie, so Yaz left and went to Adelaide. Maybe I need to come to Adelaide and get back to my
Yes,
people.
please. Yes, please.
But there is kind of, even though there's lots of other connection in my life, connection without connection, I kind of feel like it's a little bit of an emptiness.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's just so important. I remember when I was doing some coaching not too long back, and we were talking, and she was sort of asking me, when do I share my load with people? Like, do I talk to others people about it? And I said, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then I kind of paused and thought, oh, probably not as much anymore, because you've gone to Adelaide. We're not doing our random walks. I'm not, just dropping off and popping into my, friend's house as much, because, she's
Yes.
gone to Adelaide. And you sort of realize it is easy to become a little bit isolated, and not be as connected when you're just caught up in life, and your friends aren't just around the corner anymore, and you're not doing your normal routines, and you can easily find yourself a little bit disconnected. And then, it's interesting what comes up when you're a little bit disconnected.
Yeah, and I think what you're highlighting there is that connection, even though it's something that as humans we all wired for, it's
Mm.
not something that just happens. We need to be
Mm.
intentional
Yeah.
about connecting in a wholesome, well way that
Mm.
actually, nourishes us, I think.
Yeah.
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 And it does take, and I mean, I don't want to don't want to say work because I don't feel like showing up
Mm.
with you here is work. It doesn't
Work.
feel like work, but it definitely does take being intentional, like planning,
Mm.
organizing,
Mm.
and so
Mm.
yeah, it's not some. So if you're listening and you're thinking, I feel a bit empty, I feel a bit anchorless, if however it
Mm.
makes you feel, and you're recognizing that, what if it is connection? That's the
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Um, our encouragement is that well, get this book because
Yeah.
there's so much in this chapter. But I like how he starts by also sharing at the beginning of this chapter that connection starts with connection to self.
Mm.
We've both been sharing about connection to others, but
Yeah.
unless we are open
Mm.
to ourselves and
Mm.
have
And
the sense of,
honest.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Mm.
then, if we're closed off to ourselves, we're going to be closed off to others.
Agreed. Yeah, that's certainly something, like, I know that when, if you have a moment in a relationship with somebody, and it might be a bit prickly for a moment, and you kind of put the walls up a little bit, and you even close off to yourself a bit, and you start to ruminate, and you're not necessarily telling yourself the truth, or
Yeah,
what's going on. The moment though you feel a bit prickly and the walls go up, you can't connect properly with the other person.
no.
You step away, it gets a bit prickly, and you start to feel a bit lonely. So it's so important that we're aware that if we're not connecting with ourselves, that we can I remember Az was telling me something, and he the moment that he was vulnerable and shared it, it provided a space for me to then also be vulnerable and share, and it's this beautiful space when we are honest and vulnerable with ourselves, we can then encourage the other to do the same thing.
Oh, for sure. And I think that's the whole dance in this sphere is on the one hand, like we know people move towards things that are pleasurable and we move away from things that are painful. And I think it's this dance between we want connection. Connection is, life-giving and it's often joyful and it's often loving and
Hmm.
kind. And yet, so we want to move towards that. But the way there is to be vulnerable, and we kind of want to
Yeah.
avoid being vulnerable. And
That's
it's
exactly right.
yeah, so it's leaning, how do we lean into being vulnerable so that we can access, those
Mm,
connections, which is
mm.
not always easy.
No. There was something, what did he say about human being before human doing? Do you
Oh,
remember
yeah,
something
yeah,
about
yeah,
that?
he did. And I
And
think I underlined it. Let me just see if I can find
yeah,
it.
I did too.
I think
Um,
there's so many things I underlined actually. Uh,
just thought it would fit in perfectly with what we're talking about right at this moment about being vulnerable, because it's all about who we are being and how we're sort of showing up. It's mind blowing what happens when we connect back with the human being. So it
yeah.
comes before the human doing.
Yeah, and I think he then goes on to touch, and this is so true because often we live in this time and a season where we all so busy. Life is busy, and if you speak to, I don't know that there's anyone that I know that's like not busy. And for many of us, including myself, in the past, not so much now, but definitely in the past, I put so much of my identity into the doing,
Mm,
and my sense of value and
mm,
purpose and significance and all of that was really tied
mm,
up to the doing and the performing. And
mm.
even when we connect with people that we don't know and we introduce ourselves and we sort of like, hi, this is me and this is, like, or,
This is what I do.
yeah, or like, lovely to meet you. So what do you do? And
Yeah.
then it's the
Mm,
doing. And so it's really interesting that I think for many of us, we find the doing part much easier than the being part. And I know
mhm.
in coaching conversations I have with people, when we start talking about the being side of things, um, people get uncomfortable
Yeah.
because I think
Yeah.
that is like sort of a vulnerable place for
Mm,
quite a lot of us.
yeah.
And then
Yeah.
if we're so busy in the doing, we don't have to kind of even think think about how
No.
we're being.
No, and we can, if we are a bit uncomfortable with things that are on the inside, we can kind of ignore it by being busy.
Yeah,
It gives
yeah,
us an excuse, and I've noticed that to be a bit of a pattern in my life, if I'm being truly honest. I just get busy. I've got lots of kids. Oh, let's have more kids. And and let's have more dogs, and oh, let's do this job. Oh, yes, I'll do that over there as well. And I'm saying yes to about 1,000 things. And
yeah,
sometimes I've sort of realized the harder life has become sort of on the inside or with, in different seasons, often the busier I'll become because then I don't have to deal with necessarily what's truly going on. I can kind of ignore it for a time. And for a time
yeah.
that kind of fits, but it's not,
Well, the thing is,
you can't do
it
it
then
forever.
becomes and it becomes a spiral because then I think that
Yeah.
the busier we get, the easier it is to disconnect from ourselves, and then if we're
Yeah.
disconnected from ourselves, we disconnect from others.
Other
So again,
people.
it's I think it's that whole thing of what feels safer and easier in the short
Mm,
term moves us
mm.
away from what we're actually looking for in the long term.
Yes.
And so, this is why I think, and I think this is probably why staying connected and being well connected is an intentional thing
Mm.
because, naturally we would kind of just default to the easy, like, let's get
Of
busy and
course.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Mm.
that makes me think about people who there's that study where people through Harvard that over the last 88 years or whatever it's been, where they find that people who live the longest, most fulfilled, happiest lives are those who are well connected and connected with themselves and with their people. And it just
Yeah.
goes to show the importance, because we can only do it for a time and we don't feel fulfilled if we're not connected. And so it really is something beautiful and important and something that fulfills us. It gives us connection, gives us belonging, validation, and meaning to our lives. And, and thinking about
Yeah.
connecting to our, I love to be connected with God, or to, people might say to a higher power or whatever that looks
Yeah.
like in your world, but being connected to God, to nature, to our animals, just having that feeling of connection.
Well, it reminds me back to the coaching tool you and I've learned long ago about the fact that as humans we all have these six needs, and out of the
Mm,
core needs, one of them is the need for meaning, and
yeah.
connection gives us meaning, and
Gives
the other
meaning.
one is relationship, and that's connection and a sense of
Mm,
belonging, and
mm,
validation is also like that significance. So it is something that we've all been created with just by
mm.
nature of being human,
Yeah.
and then I think just looking at the animal world, I mean, if you just watch animal behaviors, how
Mm,
you very seldom see one on their own. There's often they're in pairs
mm,
or groups.
mm,
Mind you, we quite often see these koalas on their own, but I'm sure there's always another one nearby. But yeah, I think, we crave it, as it says, because it makes us whole.
mm,
Um,
mm.
So the work that he talks about then, like if it's something that
Okay.
doesn't just happen by default and something that we need
Mm,
to be intentional about,
mm,
it's something that we can cultivate, we can
mm.
pay attention to, we can, if we're interested in it, that this is it's quite, I think, exciting to recognize that there's always something that we can do to move us closer to connection.
Yes.
It's not like we
Yes.
sit back and go, oh gosh, I'm just not connected and that's so unfair and there's nothing I can do about it.
Well, we could say that, but it's just not true.
Yeah, exactly. And
Mm,
so he says in his book then, so the work to do um, is to practice vulnerability,
mm,
which takes being open. And he talks
mm,
about being, authenticity and openness. And and the thing with being open and being authentic and vulnerable, it's kind of like we're showing all our imperfections, we're showing
mm.
what the bits that we don't often like to show. And I think this is also why there's wisdom involved here. It's not about
Yes.
just going online and just blurting out,
Connecting with everyone.
willy-nilly to anybody and everybody. And it's about, yeah, wisely choosing
Mm.
who you're going to be open with and connect with,
Yeah. Yeah.
which starts with self. Hey, he says it's, starting with yourself, and
Mm.
which is also interesting because how often do we know and we read about and we've experienced that we can be our own harshest critics and we can be our
Mm.
own worst enemies. And
Yes.
so it's
Agreed.
that, starting with compassion and empathy for yourself.
Mm.
And yeah,
No, that's beautiful. Because we can't go back and change things. We can't change our stories. We can't change, how we've lived up until this point. But if we start where we're at and we have a bit of compassion, and even sometimes if we're finding it hard to have compassion for ourselves, think about perhaps where it's come from, what sort of story we're telling ourselves, and consider, is there a different story? Is there something
yeah.
else that's true? Is there a different understanding of what has happened in our life that we can um, give it a different meaning, perhaps, so that we can have compassion for ourselves?
Yeah, and I think also as you sharing that, I'm also thinking about how, it is like the chicken and the egg thing, like what comes first. But I think sometimes if we're really struggling to have that compassion for ourselves and to not judge
Mm,
ourselves so much, it's also helpful having another, like a good friend who
yeah,
does have compassion and kindness, for
for
us
us.
to
Yeah.
share with. Because I remember, like, I mean, I know quite often in the past I've had experiences where I've just been so hard on myself and down on myself. And then when
Mm,
I've shared with a good friend,
mm,
gosh, the gift in that, and
yeah.
how, my friend might have looked at me and the mirror, they
Mm,
shine a mirror back going,
yeah.
hey, you're still okay, and I still love you, and I don't think any worse
Mm,
of you, and I'm still your friend, and I
yeah.
still want to be your friend, and how powerful that is, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Because they also see us in such, like a lot of the things that we say to ourselves, we would never dream of saying to a friend. You'd never
Yeah.
even think it, let alone voice it to a friend, yet we say it to ourselves. So the moment we start to say what we're feeling or what's going on in our inner world with a friend, they're reflecting back then also their love and their compassion and what they're seeing, their meaning, their how they're seeing us, the lens that they're looking at us through. And it
Yeah.
helps us to see it in a different light.
Yeah, and I think also when we share our imperfections with those really good friends that love us and are have love for us, it also gives them permission for the same,
Yes.
Yeah. So we can all be kind of imperfect together, but not
That's what
not
we
from a
are.
below the line kind of way. The other
No.
interesting thing is just I love how, life kind of weaves these threads. And so the other day I was looking up something on YouTube for a class I teach and stumbled across a clip from Brené Brown. And
Okay.
she was just sharing about shame. She does a lot of, she's done a lot of research around shame and
Mm,
how to not carry shame.
mm,
And she said something really interesting, which touches on what he also talks about in the book. And he says, and I'm just trying to find it now. He says something like, shame is one of the things that prevents us from feeling connected.
yeah.
Because
So
when we carry shame, yeah, what does he say?
he says shame was the fear. I learned that shame was the fear of disconnection
Yes.
is the
And
language he uses.
interesting, yeah, and interesting. So Brené Brown was sharing that shame cannot exist where there is empathy. So,
Mm,
if the moment you can be vulnerable and share and receive empathy,
mm.
that's kind of, she said, if you put shame, she was saying, if you put shame in a
Oh,
petri dish
I've
and you
seen
add
this.
empathy, yeah,
Yes.
empathy to
Yes.
that, like the shame just can't survive.
No.
And I think that is another reason why connection and
Mm,
belonging is so
mm,
important,
mm,
because it's like the antidote to shame. Because when we
mm.
do share those vulnerable parts with a friend and we do share something that we might be ashamed about, and they share like, "Hey, you're not alone in this,"
Yeah.
and that's okay. And how can I help you be better?
Mm,
Or
mm.
what do you want to, and how do you want to help yourself be better?
Yeah.
That's a life-giving conversation, and it
That's
kind of
right.
just turns the dial way down on the shame.
Mm.
So yeah, so that I really
Yeah.
liked as
Keeping
well.
connected in amongst those vulnerable conversations, staying connected is what helps us then to continue being connected and vulnerable. Like we need those moments where we realize, oh, this is a safe space to share this. We're still going to stay connected. So no matter what, we're going to keep this connection.
Yeah, yeah,
Because if we were to share with the wrong person, for example, something, and then walls came up and shame was then shared by everybody, then that would feed the disconnection,
yeah,
wouldn't it? So if we're sharing and connected with the right people, with our people, and people are hearing our story and they're sharing it, and there's empathy, then it's going to be a beautiful tight connection that can't really be broken.
yeah, yeah. So I think
Mm.
if you're listening to this and you're thinking to yourself, oh, that's an area that I'd like to grow in. I think we just want to
Mm.
encourage you that it's possible. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's an area that we can all be intentional about focusing and more. And the starting point is to
Mm.
ask yourself, who in your world do you feel safe with,
Yeah.
that you can share with, and
Mm.
what could it look like to be intentional about connecting with that person
Yeah.
and sharing.
Yeah,
And
warts and all.
yeah, warts and all. And if I think at the moment I've been fortunate to always have, I've got a connection. I think actually long time ago, I think we did a podcast on your top five. Did we do like your top
Yeah,
five
we did
people?
too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've been fortunate to have, like I
Yeah.
can rattle off like top five people in my world
Mm,
who are the people that I can um
mm,
call on to share
mm,
when there's something to be vulnerable about.
mm.
And yeah, it's interesting that they live all over the world, not
Yes.
necessarily geographically where I am, and that's okay too. And that's the blessing of this wonderful, um, you know,
Mm,
other world we have where we can
yeah.
virtually connect still and come online.
Very
So
easily. Yeah, and there's no
yeah,
excuses, right? Mm,
yeah, yeah.
mm.
So
Wow, the power of connection, hey? It is powerful, it is important, it is life-giving. Um, yeah, we don't want to just fit in, we want to belong.
oh, absolutely. So highly
Mm.
recommended.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. So, and if you're finding it a real struggle and you just don't know where to start and you want more conversation,
Mm.
yeah, you know how to fi find us, reach
You
out.
know
We'd
where
love
we
a
are.
coaching conversation. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Otherwise, grab the book as well. So
for
worth
sure.
having a look. Alrighty, well, I love chatting with you, Kath. Thanks for connecting with me today and connecting with our audience. We hope that you've found a little something in our chat today and look forward to doing it all again next time.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Al.